Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day two of the BSI Privacy Standards webinar, Protecting Consumers in a Digital Age. I'm Delmy Stevenson, a lead standards development manager here at BSI, and it's a pleasure to host you. So, some very quick housekeeping rules. Today's session is a listen only and is being recorded. Please use the Q&A button on the right at any time. We will bring as many questions as we can into the panel at the end. If you have any technical issues, use the same Q&A button and our events team will help. After we finish, you'll receive a feedback form. Once you've submitted it, we'll email you the recording link and follow-up resources. So, yesterday on day one, we introduced the newly revised 27701, the Privacy Information Management System standard, which is now a standalone Type A management system standard. And that standard provides a global framework for privacy management. And in that session, we also introduced the foundational privacy standards that complement and reinforce it, such as 27018, which has also been recently updated. Today, we shift to the consumer side. People live more of their lives online, shopping, studying, socializing, accessing services, and expect clarity, control, and respect for their data. Privacy isn't just a legal checkbox, it's a cornerstone of digital trust. That's where standards help. They turn principles into practical, audible steps, building privacy into product design, governing how models and systems behave, and giving people information they can understand and act on. So, what's coming up in the next hour and a bit? We have Tony Allen on the upcoming 27566 Part 1, which offers a clear framework for age assurance, protecting young people online without unnecessary data collection. Next up, we have Milan Patel, and who will lead us on 2791, a forthcoming standard which focuses on AI and privacy. And a question there is, how does it link in with AI, other AI standards? Next up will be Patrick Curry. He will talk about another standard in development, 27565, which looks at zero knowledge proofs and will look at how you can verify information while also protecting privacy. Next up after that is Colin Wallace, and he will focus on 29184, a standard that focuses on online privacy notices and consent to help organizations make information clear and meaningful for users. Last but not least, Michelle Chiba and Ray Delmarge will be focusing on 31700 Part 1 and Part 2, which looks at bringing privacy by design into products and services from concept through to operation. Across these talks, you'll see the whole journey: policy and governance, technical assurance, and user experience, all aimed at a safer, more trustworthy consumer journeys. So, two thoughts to keep in mind. What's the right balance between protecting consumers and enabling innovation? And secondly, how do we embed privacy across policy, process, and technology so it's consistent, scalable, and auditable? And a small request that I've already mentioned, please do jump on the Q&A as we go. Even a short question can spark a really useful answer for others. And that's enough from me. Let's get started. Please welcome our first speaker, Tony Allen, to introduce ISO IEC 27566 Part 1 and what good age assurance looks like in practice. Tony, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Del. Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to this session. It's great to be able to present. Sorry, it's very dark here because it's the middle of the night here where I am. In fact, our range of speakers today are coming from all over the world, which just goes to show you how much the UK is leading the world in some of this privacy and cybersecurity development of standards. I'm here to talk about 27566, which is a BSI initiated project and is all about the protection of children online from online harm. So I am going to just make sure I can get through the slides. So what's our problem? What was it we were seeking to solve? As we've gone more and more online and services are being delivered more and more remotely, there is a need to ensure that we can provide that additional layer of protection for children as they develop and grow, so that they can enjoy and explore the online space and the online world and services that are out there, but can do so in a way which is designed for them and age appropriate for them. What that means is fundamentally you have to have a process in place whereby if you are providing content or services or information or goods or anything that's potentially risky to children, you need to be able to assure yourself that the age groups that are appropriate for the material and the information that's being presented. This is not necessarily about blocking children from access things. It's more about enabling to have an enjoyable, safe and privacy preserving and secure online experience. So a little bit about where I'm from. So I'm UK based. We are an age check certification scheme. We're a UCAS accredited conformity assessment body. We test that ID and age check systems work. And it's quite important as a first part of what I'm going to talk about to separate out age assurance from identity assurance. They are two separate things. They can be related and they can be connected, but you don't have to prove who you are to prove how old you are. And some of the technologies and some of the approaches to this, and particularly those that are very privacy conscious and privacy preserving, actually aren't trying to identify you, aren't using techniques to identify you. They are building systems and processes that do that entirely without that activity, and that can include just simply the size of your hand, or it could include your pulse. And some research out yesterday about how wearable technologies such as your Apple Watch or glasses or metaverse VR headsets could be used for AI using things like pulse in your body. So lots of interesting stuff going on there, which are not about identity. You can use identity, so you can. People think of age assurance as being, I upload a copy of my passport or my driving license. Yes, you can do that, but what's at the cutting edge of a lot of this work is about how you achieve age assurance without doing that. It is underpinned by really clear privacy and data protection. And we're going to hear, you heard yesterday, I think in this session, all about the new 27701, but also work on children's data. You work with the Information Commission's officers, work with the Irish Data Protection Commissioner on behalf of the European Union on age-appropriate design for online services, and then underpinning management systems, in particular information security management and privacy management. And you're going to hear about some of those, I think, as well. Why is this such a challenge? Well, as we go online, more technology and AI and all sorts of things, we see more people trying to spoof, get their way around it, trying to fake their way into things. There's lots of attempts to use, for instance, a fake ID card or simple Photoshop tools or image editing tools. And so there's a lot of work going on at international level in relation to having assurance in those frameworks of authentication at a global level. So the 29115, which is currently in review, it's now 12 years old. It's kind of falling a little bit way behind some of the thinking on trust frameworks and identity verification around the world, and so is currently going through a bit of an update on that. But you need to be sure that the document you're presenting and the person you're presenting is something that is genuine. We have Lola Pepsi here. Interestingly about this, but the only thing that we've changed on this is the picture. All the rest of the data is correct. But the picture was interesting in that it didn't work when we first tried it. It only worked when we stuck some googly eyes on it from Hobbycraft, and then it started to get accepted. So we're looking at how systems can detect this type of it's a bit of a funny one there, but that's all we do. Also, we look at AI assisted image manipulation. And this is where you've got AI tools being used to be able to change the appearance of somebody, make them look older. Can you pick up your smartphone and just go, make me look 10 years older, and then show your smartphone to the screen, and there you go, you're through the system. So there's a lot of work going on in relation to biometric presentation, attack, morphing, issues around AI image generators, injection attack, where you're basically trying to bypass the camera that's on your device and inject the code in the process. All of that sort of work is currently going on with standards development. I'm here to talk about 27566, which was a BSI initiated project. I'm the co-editor or technical lead editor for it. It kind of follows on from a strand of work that BSI has conducted over basically the last 10 to 12 years, starting with PAS 76, which looked at online safety, and then PAS 1296, which looked at online age verification in 2018, was published as a document. That was really in preparation for legislation in the UK under Part 3 of the Digital Economy Act. That didn't end up happening, but we then moved forward with the Online Safety Act 2023, which has come into force in the last 2 months. And so the ISO work on this has been about getting an age assurance standards framework in place as part of the Online Safety Act, but that is replicated literally all over the world. So I'm here in California, where there's been laws going through the Californian state very recently on age assurance. I'm then heading out to Asia after this, where there's loads of stuff going on. We've just completed work in Australia. I've been in New Zealand as well recently. There's loads of things going on age assurance all over the world. So this is a 3-part standard. The part 1, it deals with the framework and is currently in its final stages. The ballot, the global ballot for it closes on in a week's time, and I'm hopeful and confident and praying that we actually get it over the line, and we can get that out as a final, as a published standard before the end of the year. Part 2 is really about the people who have to put it in place. So it's targeted at the relying parties or the platforms or the product engineers and developers who are basically given the task by the boss. We want to put age assurance in place for this particular part of the metaverse or this AI chatbot or whatever, and then they have to go, well, how the hell do I do that? And so part 2 is about those technical approaches and guidelines to help them through some of the trade-offs and some of the discussions that you have to have as part of this. And then part 3 is about comparison or analysis. So how do you take one type of age assurance system and compare it against another, and how do you build and develop that? And this has actually also gone along with a piece of work going on at IEEE, where they've done a standard on age verification, where that's got some of the measurement tools in there, some of the what is considered to be effective, strict, basic levels of age assurance, and we actually merge those together into a single certification process. So I've been talking about age assurance. Let's kick off with what is it? It's a bit of a new term. It was actually coined by Baroness Kidron in her work that she did on age-appropriate design as part of the development of Section 123 of the Data Protection Act 2018. And age assurance covers 3 things. So first of all, it covers age verification. It's a collective term covering these 3 things. So age verification is where you go and you find a piece of your date of birth, wherever that may well be. It could be on a document, it could be on a bank record, it could be on a school record, wherever it is, you go and find that date of birth. And then from that, once you bind it to the individual, i.e. make sure it's their date of birth, you can calculate how old they are. That is simply age verification. Then you have age estimation. Age estimation is the analysis of features of humans that vary with age. Unfortunately, we all age, we all get older. Our face changes, our voice changes, our hands change, our pulse change, our eyebrows change, all sorts of things change and AI and technology can analyze that. And then the third one is where you discover any other fact or facts about an individual, and from those facts, other than date of birth, from those facts, it's reasonable to infer something about their age. So they're in year 9 at school, or they're a licensed commercial airline pilot, or they hold a credit card, or they are married. There are all kinds of things from which you can make reasonable assumptions about people's age, and that is the process of age inference. And those three things make up age assurance methods. So what have we been working on, and how does that all fit together? Well, we're working on age assurance systems that are capable of international conformity assessment as a product, process, or service, and come under the ISO 17065 accreditation, but also ones that fit together with global testing and analysis models, such as the product quality model and software testing and analysis. And that's where we get to with 27566. And it covers core character, the standard, the framework covers 5 core characteristics. First of all, the functionality. So what is it doing? Is it checking your ID? Is it checking your face? Is it checking your pulse? What is it? How is it doing? How's it performing? How well does it do that? How accurate is it? What's its classification accuracy? These things are not 100%, and they never probably will be 100%. But how good are they at doing what they do? Critically and front and center of this is privacy. How is it done in a privacy preserving way? How are we ensuring that data is not being harvested? We've not got these great big data sets of what people are doing and where they're going and where they're visiting, which present privacy and security risks. Security around how you ensure that it's secure by design and default, and you've not got inappropriate forwarding of age assurance results or reuse, or how the system is resistant to attack, and also how it fails, if it fails, in a safe way. And then finally, you've got acceptability, which is all about inclusivity, user information, user engagement, and complaints and redress about these systems. And all of the standard then says this should be laid out in a practice statement, so that the age assurance provider should provide an information statement for people to understand exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then the relying parties, the people who actually make the age-related eligibility decision, should also have a practice statement about what their policies are towards what they will accept, what they won't accept, etc. So it's quite transparent, and the information is out there, and those are to be ISO compliant with this, those practice statements need to be publicly available. And then you get into the kind of nitty-gritty of how we then analyze that, and you've got both quantitative and you've got qualitative approaches. On the quantitative side, you've got a lot of software testing, a lot of analysis. They're not all the same, so you can't test them all in the same way. So using 29119 and the series of software testing that sits under that, and also using the IEEE 2089, which has got a lot more detail in and a more operational level about levels of performance and levels of functionality for age assurance systems than the framework has got. And they all support test houses, so things like presentation attack detection I mentioned, injection attack, also things like age analysis performance, how well it analyzes your face or your voice or your hands, biometric comparison, how well it matches your face to the face that appears on your passport, if that's the method that's used. All of those sort of testing, laboratory-based sort of analysis are important. But on the qualitative side, you've got information security management and privacy information management systems. So the 27701, the new document that's been just been published, 27001 on information security, and then on acceptability, you've got things like the W3C standards that look at how you can be inclusive, how you can make sure that you support people with additional needs, users that might have, for instance, vision impairment or hearing impairment or whatever they may be. Then have part 2, as I mentioned, which is about how you actually then put that in, and you have part 3, which is about how you analyze and compare all that. And this is really all about supporting the implementation of age assurance as a regulatory tool to ensure that children have a safe online experience. I think you can do that anywhere, and the part of the work we did in Australia was to explore how that might be placed across the tech stack. You know, is it on the device? Is it in the system and browser? Is it on the network? Is it on the app store, on the platform? Is it on the website? Is it somewhere in the back end? There are a whole host of ways that this can be done, and this framework is intended to enable thinking about how you do that in a way that is privacy preserved and secure, interoperable, and usable for the widest range of services and access to things. It also applies offline as well as it applies online, so it isn't just the requirements there, it's just the information. And this is to support regulation, and it's important to understand that certification is not regulation, regulation is not certification. I'm going to quickly go through this last couple of slides. But when you've got regulation for things like access and content and material, you have to be quite careful about how you do that. I'm just going to briefly go through this last one very quickly, which is about earned recognition. When you look at what businesses do, they fall into one of these categories. They're either compliant or they're not compliant, and there's some bits in between where they're trying to comply or they're actively non-compliant. When that applies to any business, it applies to any type of thing. What do we do as a certification body? We're interested in the compliant operators. We're interested in how they can get their certification and how they can comply and meet all the ISO requirements. We're much less interested as we go down that in the ones that are not compliant. That's not what we do. We share information with regulators. The regulators' attention is the opposite of that. They should have a light touch and trust and confidence in certification. They may be helping to encourage people towards compliance using tools in regulatory education, awareness, information campaigns. But of course, the regulator's attention really ought to be on evidence gathering, enforcement and sanctions. And where most businesses online are at the moment is probably in that blue box, particularly when you look at age assurance. And so the aim for regulators is to get them to move towards certification, not to get them to go towards evidence gathering, enforcement and sanctions. Thank you very much. That's just a bit about who we are and how to contact us. I'm going to wrap up there, and I'm going to hand on wonderful hand on to Milan Patel. Milan is, I think, in Sydney in Australia, so that shows we're all over the place for this webinar. He's just coming off the back of the SC42 AI Summit that's been going on. Milan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Good day to you all. I'm going to focus on AI and privacy and a standard that's currently in draft international standards phase, ISO IEC 27091. I'll also focus on some other aspects that can help with governance and assurance. So next slide, please. So here we are with the agenda. We'll go through an overview of this standard on AI and privacy. We'll focus on AI impact assessments, and then we'll focus on standards that can support AI governance and assurance, and in particular, the ISO IEC 42001 AI management system. Next slide, please. So let's focus a little bit on privacy and AI systems. I've summarized in the first bullet here kind of what does privacy really mean, and it's really about the ability of an individual to control how their data gets used, and to ensure that this data, this personal data of theirs, is protected and therefore free from unauthorized disclosure, and therefore remains confidential. We also should start with the premise that AI systems are code that runs on information processors. So effectively, they're similar to software and other information systems, and therefore conventional privacy and data protection laws and practices still apply. So, really your starting point is then things like the requirements and controls that are specified in standard like ISO IEC 27701, the Privacy Information Management System standard, but also how you perform risk management for privacy as described in ISO IEC 27557. But there are some nuances, and these also occur right across the AI system lifecycle, but also as a result of adversarial threats. So let's dive deeper into 27091. Next slide, please. So the title of this new draft standard, well, it's currently in draft, but should be published sometime in the early 2026, is Artificial Intelligence Privacy Protection. It's being developed within the committee or subcommittee of JTC1 for cybersecurity and privacy. Next slide, please. So what does 27091 help you with? So it's really about doing privacy risk management for AI and machine learning systems and across their life cycle. So it builds on fundamental standards both for privacy like ISO IEC 29100, but also for artificial intelligence and the terminology and concepts that are defined in the standard 22989. So if we think about how AI systems are developed and they rely heavily on training data, that data can also include personal information or personal data in some cases. And so therefore, even at the training stage, there is the processing of personally identifiable information. And therefore, you need to do your due diligence and risk management around the impacts to privacy. So privacy can also be impacted through adversarial attacks, membership inference attacks, which effectively try to determine if a particular sample was used in the training data, and if that sample is related to personal data, then that can incur a privacy incident or breach. Other attacks can include extraction, data poisoning, model inversion, for example, but also privacy incidents such as insider threats and transfer learning vulnerabilities. So as you try to reuse AI systems for other purposes as well. The standard also includes a structured approach to various functional views, taxonomies, and also looks at privacy management across the entire AI system lifecycle. It also discusses various stakeholder roles and the roles that they play in protecting personal data, and also the importance of context and ecosystem in privacy analysis, and so how the AI system is applied matters as well. Next slide, please. So within the standard, there are some high-level guidance statements, and they're clustered into these four buckets. So there's about 34 or 35 guidance statements across the document. And so we can effectively summarize the classification of these statements as under doing risk analysis and addressing risks through controls, which are organizational or technical measures to address risk, to apply privacy engineering techniques to AI systems, and these might be aspects such as performing de-identification of training data, or even performing, for example, de-identification on the outputs of AI systems, doing things like privacy impact assessments, and identifying controls that can address the impacts that are identified, and also include things like consumer demand and regulation aspects where applicable as well. And then there's the establishment of a governance scheme. We'll come into that as well, and the use of AI capabilities to enhance privacy. So using AI within privacy enhancing technologies, for example. Next slide, please. There are aspects on things like the privacy related to generative AI, for example, and also the standard highlights things like problems with data leakage. So if you were to ground prompts into a generative AI system with additional data, for example, files that might also include personal data, that information might also emerge into the output. And so it's important to manage data classification correctly for both files that you use in addition with the generative AI system, but also to ensure that the outputs of these systems respect the data classification, and especially the highest level of data classification of the information that is used in the AI system. Next slide, please. So in addition to data protection or privacy impact assessments, it's important that we conduct AI system impact assessments as well. And so this is really about determining the potential impacts to individuals, groups of individuals, and society through the development and use of AI systems. The standard ISO AEC 42005 AI system impact assessments effectively guide you on how to implement an AI system impact assessment process within an organization, but also how to perform documentation on systems, data, and models, and also how to effectively model or brainstorm the potential benefits and harms of AI systems to individuals and society. So if we take these in the context of privacy, we could think about, for example, the potential benefits from AI systems that are used to enhance privacy, and also, for example, the potential harms from AI systems that are used in, for example, healthcare services where personal data and sensitive information is commonplace. Next slide, please. So here we're summarizing really the management system standard ISO AEC 42001. And this is really important in terms of helping an organization implement management processes to support responsible development and responsible use of AI systems. It's risk-based and continuously improving, like other management system standards, for example, the Privacy Information Management System Standard. And one of the beauties about the risk management aspects in 42001 is that the AI system impacts are integrated into the risk management as well, and therefore the reference controls that are also available in the annexes of the standard can be used to address the impacts that are identified through the impact assessment. Implementing 42001 helps with accountability and also providing documented evidence that you have performed your due diligence for responsible AI. And it's also available for third-party conformity assessment and certification, and therefore providing that mechanism of assurance to stakeholders and for supply chain management. Next slide, please. So in summary, existing privacy and data protection frameworks can also be applied to the data processing within AI systems. But we also have to think about the additional privacy risks that occur through the use of AI systems across the AI system lifecycle. We saw there are issues with personal information within training data, for example, but also personal information that might be revealed through the outputs of AI systems as well. We saw the high-level guidance that's within 27091 about risks and controls, the role of AI governance, and also the use of AI to enhance privacy. And AI system impact assessments are really there to augment the privacy and data protection impact assessments that are already commonplace and sometimes required by law within various jurisdictions, including jurisdictions that need to comply with GDPR. And then 42001 as a management system standard that can help with accountability and assurance, but also to implement an AI governance within an organization. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. And next in the panel will be Patrick Curry on zero knowledge proofs for privacy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Milan. So I hope everybody is still awake and engaged. And I'm going to move forward really quickly in the interest of time. And if anybody wants to follow up, please contact Elmi or Louise in BSI, and I look forward to being able to help. So we all know that, so I'm just waiting for the bill to come through. We're surrounded by an increasing amount of personally identifiable information. Data is everywhere, for sure. And we need to use it in lots of different ways with different organizations. And you'll recognize a lot of that there. Whether in what you're doing as a citizen, whether you're acting as a consumer, whether you are an employee of an organization, or whether you're working in the government, all of those apply. Sorry about this. Oh. And the question here is, we seem to have had a bit of a problem going on with the bills here. Sorry. Come on. Okay. It was fine in rehearsal, as they say, but maybe not now. So we have a lot of that information that contains PII needs to be protected and used by others. And we have a real problem in this space because data proliferation is a major issue. And a lot of the data that is out there in banks, in governments, and many other organizations is out of date. So knowing where the good information is difficult. And what happens is that data aggregators pull a lot of data together in an effort to try and improve the quality, but it's really, really hard. So what's needed not only is that we protect that PII, Sorry, Louise, I don't know if you can hear me, but the delay on this is really significant. So ZKP here, a zero knowledge proof, I'll explain what that is in a minute, but the point here is that we don't need to have access to data. The point is being able to validate the right data at source with the authority that has that data. And for that, we need a proof. So we don't need to know the data, we just need to know that what we've got is correct. That is true in the majority of information requests and checks taking place. So how do we do those proofs without exchanging data? Well, zero knowledge proofs are one of a family of 3 privacy enhancing technologies, the others being secure multi-party computation and homomorphic encryption. And there are newer other technologies coming through as well. You'll be pleased to hear that I'm not going to talk about the maths, partly because I'm not a mathematician, I'm an engineer. But I would describe it this way. Imagine that you and I have a Rubik's Cube. Those Rubik's Cubes are clearly the same, but if I move my Rubik's Cube around, which is what I'm doing in a zero knowledge proof, in relation to the data, so this is a mathematical representation of the data, I know that if I send to you just a combination of 3 or 4 of those squares, just like a Rubik's Cube, the mathematical properties of a Rubik's Cube and of zero knowledge proofs means that if those coordinates are the same at your end, then the rest of the Rubik's Cube is the same. So the rest of that data is the same. And all I'm doing is checking a small part of the mathematical transform. So there is no data going between the organizations, no fact data going between the organizations, yet still I can prove that I have the data that you have is the same as the data that I have. So in a simple example, today, what's your password? People exchange the password, or they exchange some other so-called secret or personal piece of data. What we're looking at in the future, and it's already here, is I have the proof. I know it's there. However, how do you actually use this when most of the situations that we're concerned about involve privacy, because we're talking personal data? So this is the reason why 27565 was created, to focus on privacy, how you use ZKP in relation to addressing privacy risks. So yes, we can prove that something is greater than something, or some other data is, so that's calculated, or we can prove that certain aspects of data are the same. We can do it for one instance of data, or we can do it for multiple instances of data. And we can also do it for more complex situations, ranging type information. So for example here, how does the number actually, we're not representing necessarily an age, we're just confirming that you're over a particular age, so you meet a particular requirement, or that you're in a particular salary band for income tax purposes, and whether or not you've actually paid that income tax. So these are all real requirements today. And this document is the framework for how to use ZKP to protect that PII. And there it is in words. And we're talking about not just minimizing the disclosure of information, of any information, necessary or not. We're actually avoiding disclosure altogether. There is no disclosure of that information in most cases. So what we've got in the document are fairly standard. The scope of the document, the references that are required, the definitions, and a bit about zero knowledge proofs, what they are, what the different architectural options there are for ZKP, and then how you apply ZKP to address privacy type issues and preserve privacy, and what kind of considerations that you need to include feeding into your risk assessments. So there's something about the properties of ZKP that I need to mention. So you can obviously read this, but the key three properties are completeness, soundness, and the fact that it's zero knowledge. And so you have the prover in the most simple case, that is the one who holds the authoritative data. And then you have the verifier, which is the party that wants to check that that data is correct. And the point is that if one assumes that what the authority has got is correct, then the prover can be confident that if the technology satisfies the completeness requirement, then they can rely on the proof accurately reflecting what the authority has got. Equally, the other way around, if the prover statement is false, in other words, they say, no, this is not correct. Now, it doesn't matter how the relying party or the bank or the prover behaves, the verifier will reject it. So that's the soundness property. And the zero knowledge aspect is that nobody learns, or the verifier doesn't learn any information other than the fact that the statement is true. There are different kinds of ZKP that one can use, interactive and non-interactive. I'm not going to go into the details of those. They're in the document, but one is using other components in there, particularly the common reference string, which provides the mathematical offset that is used within each of the each of the parties that are using the ZKP. And so the attribute providers, or the authorities that we're talking about, it's possible for them, as I said earlier, to generate computed attributes from that, as well as validating static attributes that exist. So, for example, we know that once you've actually reached the age of 18, you can't go backwards, much as some people might want to. There are three primary modules. So there's a setup module, which is effectively the orchestration, which connects the verifier with the prover. And within that, you can see that each of the components has certain features with an auditor underneath that provides the local checks. You have a prover module. So this is what the prover would hold. So the authority here needs something, if you're dealing particularly with identity related information, it needs a witness in that process in order to be confident at the relying party side that that person who is making the claim for some certain information, that is the actual person. So this is what we call subject binding, that the subject and the data is really about that subject. So that has to take place, which is why the witness is required at the prover level. Equally, on the verifier side, here are the very simple components which are described in the model. So I mentioned subject binding. This is critical because it's the major attack point. It's nothing to do with ZKP. It's everything to do with the process. So we can't look at ZKP as an isolated tool and assume that that's going to solve everything. It's a tool that's used within a process. And so for subject binding, at the data level, there needs to be some kind of identifier that can be used for that transaction. And underneath all of that, it could be any of these, a globally unique identifier, locally unique, or something that's generated specifically for that transaction. And it could be just be a hash function. So there's a hash coming against a passport number, for example. So that hash, if they're using the same algorithm, both parties, that hash will be the same. So they only need to use the hash as a primary key in the transaction. So there are some additional characteristics of ZKP that's quite useful. As I've said already, it can be used against one authoritative document or attribute or whatever, or multiple ones. it's not possible it rejects a replay attack because you're not going to get the same behavior each time you do a check. The performance is really fast. You're into the microsecond, maybe millisecond, if depending on the networks, and you've got a high degree of interoperability. In fact, because organizations that are doing data validation, one of the key things is they need to be confident that their data quality is good before they start. Otherwise, they're going to get a lot of rejections. So what's happening now is it's really very interesting to see organizations beginning to use ZKP to validate data internally, which they know in order to improve the data quality. So, for example, I'm aware of one bank at the moment that I'm working with, or have been working with, which has over 100,000 account holders, where the data is not sufficient to be able to contact them and manage the accounts properly from the bank side. And they need tools like this to be able to validate data without exposing the fact that their data quality is not as good as it should be. And this is really common across organizations. So this tool, the side effect of this is not just protecting privacy, it's actually improving data quality, but without exposing the company or the government organization to additional reputational or other business risks. That's really valuable. And the side effect of that is it encourages organizations to collaborate, whereas otherwise they shouldn't. It also permits the selective disclosure of attributes now. And this is a really, really common feature going into digital wallets. And you'll hear a lot more about this as new regulations start to come in. And the first digital wallet for government purposes in the UK went live last Friday, and that was for veterans. So a veteran can now have a digital identity card in effect for carrying out interactions with government and others. There are many use cases, but here are really common ones. Age verification, absolutely, and Tony's touched on that this morning. There's a massive amount in fraud prevention, and this is where I spend a lot of my time, counter fraud and cybersecurity. And things like auctions and blind auctions. So you don't want to know who it is that's bidding, but you do want to have the confidence that that is a valid bidder. Otherwise, it could wreck your auction. Obviously, it has huge relevance in things like on-chain and off-chain, particularly off-chain data, which is bound to a chain. So you may have data where the data's not on the chain for reasons of right to be forgotten and so on, but you want to be able to break the link with the blockchain, and you can do that by using ZKP to control that. And it has relevance in many other areas, CBDCs as an example, but there are many more. So from a privacy point, come on. It is coming back, there we go. There are so many relevant functions and considerations from a privacy point of view. Happy to take questions on this, but ZKP, and what I would really highlight is things around user control, data minimization or elimination of data in the channel, significant improvements in accuracy and quality of data, unlinkability and linkability are other functions. And there is then also, it means that there's no data leakage either between actors that are involved in the processes. So when carrying out a privacy risk assessment, here all of these areas can benefit from what's happening with using a ZKP. There are a couple of hot buttons at the moment. So one of the things that we're looking at is collusion attacks, which is where somebody deliberately shares some of their information with another party in order that that other party can impersonate somebody like an adult or whatever if they're a child. And so this is something that that is being explored at the moment. So last slide. The really important thing here is the need to minimize data exposure or remove that altogether. And this is a strategic activity and concern today. And we're all reliant on very, very high quality data. Otherwise, that leads to all sorts of unintended consequences. And that means that we just need to validate data with the right sources rather than just trying to accumulate and access lots of data. Now, to do this, and to do this using mathematical techniques rather than exposing data unnecessarily, privacy and enhancing technologies have an increasing role. And one of those, which is particularly easy to use, is ZKP. So that's why we have 27565. It is at FDIS now, and it will be published. It's really at the end of the process now, and we expect it to be published relatively soon. There is another standard that goes into specifics around biometric data, 24745, which some people may be interested in. But I leave you with the key observation that EU digital identity wallets are now in law in the eIDAS 2 Act, the regulation, and that's going to trigger much greater use of privacy enhancing technologies for sure. And obviously other countries are looking to develop their digital wallets, often called digital credential wallets, as we go forward. And if you haven't got one now, you are going to have them in the future. So I'm now going to hand over to Colin Wallace, my very old friend who is a titan in the identity management industry. He's been around a very long time and he looks deceptively young, but he is one of the most knowledgeable people I know in this area. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us here. This is going to be a lighter presentation. You've heard from Patrick on ZKPs, and this is when we're talking about privacy notices and consent. It's a slightly lighter topic. First up, I do want to reference Nat Sakamura for the concept, the baseline of these slides I'm going to use today. Nat was the project editor. He was assisted by national bodies of Philippines, Sweden, Canada, maybe one other that I recall from the work at the time. But Nat proposed or did an explainer for 29184, and this is primarily what you're seeing or today that I've modified it quite considerably. And we also big attribution to the national body of Japan for allowing that as well. Thank you so much. So this next slide talks about these basically the agenda that we've got today. As I say, I'm going to keep it quite high level as we go through. Next slide, please. It's taking a while to turn there. So background context, yes. So as previous speakers have said today, we've had that sort of that emerging use of online has motivated and pivoted across to concerns around privacy and online transactions and experiences, and that's motivated a lot of work. So this standard, of course, was at the time, during the time of GDPR. We had, the Data Protection Directive prior to that, the adoption, if you like, notice, if you like, that the GDPR was going to go ahead in 2016, but it was actually enacted in 2018. So we had that sort of precursor. We also had the CCPA coming through sort of in the latter part of that time. And of course, there was privacy regulations all around the world, in Australia, New Zealand, and lots of other places, Singapore and others. So the idea of 29184 was to generalize how do you do it? If you've got these regulations, that's all very well. It's what's got to be achieved, but how do you implement? And it was designed to be very a broad brush supportive. Next slide, please. So its purpose is really threefold, and it really comes to that sort of be clear on your notice and a framework for how you communicate privacy motivations and intentions with notice and consent. Standardized consent management process was the second part of this. The idea being that eventually, should a regulation want to use it for conformity assessment beyond there, for conformity assessment certification, it may provide for consent and notice. It may provide some basis for that. It doesn't actually achieve that itself, but it was designed to be able for it to be enhanced towards that direction. And of course, user protection for user rights is ultimate. Next slide, please. So our scope application here really talks about much of what I've said there with the standard applying to those online environments, and particularly online service providers will find this useful, as do e-commerce websites, cloud services, and so on. And of course, while I said that it was a less technical standard than ZKP's emerging and various other standards, there are some procedural aspects of privacy. I think there's a tendency to think, well, notice and consent is common sense, right? It's easy enough. Actually, it's interesting when you delve into it, how many moving parts there are. And now that so much of this is regulated, you've got to be really careful that you cover all those moving parts. And this is why this standard has great application across many many jurisdictions with privacy consent regulations in them. Next slide, please. So what I've done here to make life a little bit easier is I briefly brought up both the normative reference, the 29100 privacy framework, originally out in 2011, was updated. There's an updated version in 2024. So it's built off 29100, as you'll find many standards in the privacy space are. They're built around there. But what's interesting also is the bibliography, and I put that down there just to give you a sense of where some of the other inspirations came from. Of course, 24760 was a core standard out of Working Group 5, and 27701 has already been mentioned several times today by Tony Milan, I think, also, as well as perhaps not Patrick, but perhaps so. 29115 also from other previous speakers. 29151 also, certainly that code of practice has been pretty critical. Interesting to see some of the other bits. Now, item 6 there, METI from Japan. In fact, some of that work, some of the concepts actually arose from that original standard, and I think that was part of Japan National Body's proposal to sort of take some of that core concept, the generalized work, and bring it into a standard, particularly when it was needed with some of the jurisdictions moving towards regulation as they were at the time. Kantara was right in there as well with its early work in the standard information sharing label and consent receipt. Of course, these things were coming from other industries, industry spaces. The consent receipt, interestingly enough, the consent receipt itself relied on 29184 much later on after it's published. to be able to create the technical specification 27560, a consent record information structure. So be aware of those. When you are looking at 29184, please, please, please download 29100. It is a free standard, but it's critical to be able to use the reference because it moves back and forwards onto it considerable number of times. So you really need to have 29100 in your hand. Next slide, please. So again, what I've done is I've just taken the key aspects of the table of contents here to give you an idea of how easy it is to read, actually. So, you'll see it split down there from, the notice, the contents of notice and consent and so on. And basically what you're looking at here is effectively controls. Each of these subsections are literally 1 or 2 sentence controls and then additional information. So you can see how it's very easy to implement. And if you go back to if you recall my point about thinking that you have all this in your head and how hard can it be to do notice and consent, I write them all the time. There are a lot of moving parts, and here they are. So you have to, particularly in a regulatory environment, you have to keep all of these certainly in play. And certainly down in there in the change of conditions, wasn't able to easily pick on sit on the page there, but that's really things like renewing notice and renewing consent, because of course that's pretty critical. You've got to really look at it in the terms of the specifying the controls and specifying the process for asking for consent and collecting and processing PII. Next slide, please. So practical applications coming towards the end here. I'm conscious we're quite short of time. So, it basically gives these practical applications and certainly, supporting regulations is a key part of that, and working through machine readable explanations of that. And basically there is more work. I do encourage you to look at a piece of work for the machine readable part of that. And that was, let me just find the details of it. It was basically built off 27560 that I talked about. And there was a machine readable part that was written by three authors, Harsh Pandit, Jan Lindqvist and Georgia Krog. These guys were actually on the Working Group 5 subcommittee working group working on the standard. What they did is they brought forward the machine readable part that 29184 introduces, and then 27560, the consent receipts information structure, took forward. And these guys actually take it a step further. So I do encourage you to look for that piece of work, particularly if you're referencing GDPR and the Data Governance Act in the European context. Certainly useful. Next slide, please. Actually, pretty much covered that with just what I was saying there. Article 7, particularly, but too quick for me there. Article 7, particularly the consent part, I think there are some other aspects there. CCPA, as I said, was coming through there, but the other privacy acts, as I've talked about around the world, were particularly interested there. So with that, I think we can go forwards, and I can thank you all for your attention today, trying to catch up time quickly here. And I'm passing neatly on to Michelle Shiba and Ray Dilmage. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. I am Ray Dolmage from Canada, and I'm here with my colleague Michelle Shiba, both of us who worked on the PC 317 standards for privacy by design. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how this work started and why it has value to both consumers and business. Next slide. Oh, it's not syncing. Okay. The origin of the whole area of privacy was because consumers have had a value for this for a long time. It is, however, for all of us, cultural in our context, so that what was considered private may vary between different cultures and different countries. The ISO Consumer Policy Committee considered privacy of personal information back in the late 1990s, but this was focused on access to, but not the use of collected personal data. As smartphones and the advances in technology allowed for integration of services, applications, and the rise of online gaming, social media, and IoT, ISO Consumer Policy Committee members began to discuss in the early 2010s the use of data and the privacy rights that were being affected. After extensive discussion, considerable research, and a final report in 2017-2018, ISO Consumer Policy Committee proposed a project that led to the ISO PC 317. This was a one-time, one-stop project to write a standard on privacy by design that was approved by the ISO Technical Management Board in 2018. This was also a project committee which set out to operationalize the principles of privacy by design. The key uniqueness of this committee was its approach from the consumer lens perspective. In operationalizing the principles of privacy by design, businesses can actively address the trust and control needs of consumers, which are a key element in their use of that particular business or service. Next slide. And over to Michelle now.
Thanks so much, Ray. I will now provide a very brief overview of both parts of the ISO 31700 standard that we published in early 2023. And its title is Privacy by Design for Consumer Goods and Services. Next slide. Part 1, which is labeled ISO 31700-1, may be considered the foundational standard because it's a set of high-level requirements to achieve privacy by design, but of course, from a consumer perspective. We deliberately developed it not as a how-to prescriptive standard and requirements, but rather we wanted it to be a framework that businesses will find valuable if they implement it, and this will help them to gain the trust of consumers of their goods or services. Next slide. The committee felt that we needed a technical report, or what we're calling Part 2 of the standard. And this technical report provides illustrative use cases as well as the associated analysis. And they were specifically, the use cases were specifically chosen to help with understanding the requirements of 3100 Part 1, which I spoke to earlier, the high-level requirements. Thank you. Next slide. Ray?
Thank you, Michelle. And now I'm going to talk about why did we convert this committee to a standard technical committee under JDC1. Started off with, at the beginning of this whole project, Canada, among other members, had said that this is not a one-time, one standard project. It actually is ongoing. Much bigger than that, and it required, therefore, an ongoing committee to carry out and maintain the work to address the consumer privacy by design across the wide range of consumer-focused products areas that are coming in development. There needed to be, in our view, an ongoing permanent committee to effectively take this on. It needed to follow the principles and requirements, however, of ISO 31700-1. As the work on the ISO 31700-1 and its companion ISO TR, Technical Report 31700-2 came to a close, an ad hoc group was formed to consider the future of the committee. And publishing its report in 2022, it recommended that the PC become a new technical committee. It was agreed to proceed this request to the ISO Technical Management Board, and after a successful ballot to ISO members and further discussion at the ISO Technical Management Board, the new committee, ISO IEC JDC1 SC44, was established. And the work began immediately with the first meeting being held in London in May 2025. Next slide, please. There are, as in the case of all ISO committees, there are websites for each one. This is the link you can go to find the current committee. There are many options here, such as quick links to work programs, work areas, which are for us only, but there are also resources. So I would suggest that you locate this through iso.org, and you can find search for the committee. There also is, in addition, a website run by the JDC1 main committee. This has more daily information, some research documents, and that also can be reached. So you consider this to be the formal website and the other one to be the informal, and both are useful. Next slide, please. So you may say, how do I get involved? Because you have an interest either as a consumer organization, or you may be a small, medium enterprise who's trying to get through the many privacy rules that exist around the world. So ISO IEC JDC1 has in the last few years realized the absolute essential requirement to have consumers involved in a lot of its work. So it actively seeks to put consumers onto committees. It also asks their committees to actually show that they're doing this. So I would suggest that you can, if you want to be involved, you can contact your national standards body, which is the ISO member. In the case of the UK, it is the British Standards Institution. If you're not from there, look for your own member. And if you are involved in consumer work, you can also talk to people that are in the ISO Consumer Policy Committee who may be able to help you. It is a good idea, I think, in my view, to connect not only with SC44, but if you're a consumer, with the local national ISO-COPOCO member. And we, as a part of this committee, welcome consumers and experts to join this work because there is a lot to do. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you to all of our speakers. We've covered a lot of ground, from age assurance and AI governance to zero knowledge proofs, privacy notices, and privacy by design. So it's been a jam-packed morning. Let's bring everyone back for a short Q&A. Please, can all the panelists turn on their cameras and mic so we can hear you? I don't think we're going to have a lot of time because we have to finish just a little bit after 11:20. However, if we can get in a few questions, that would be great. Overrunning just a little bit. So we had two questions come in before this webinar. Tony, how confident are regulators in enforcing age assurance requirements?
I think regulators around the world are grappling with new regulations, grappling with some of the practical consequences of age assurance. Yes, it's fair to say that when the Online Safety Act came into force in the UK, just towards the end of July, there were a few initial teething problems with it. Some of that was perhaps to be expected, but it seems to have settled down now and seems to be going well. And the work with Ofcom, trading standards, the police, Information Commissioner's Office in the UK as regulators, properly understanding it, What will most definitely help, though, is having an international standard that they can rely on to give them confidence in the fundamentals and basics of the age assurance systems that are being deployed and the way that relying parties is doing it. So that's a really key part of why we've done all this work over the last few years.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony, for that answer. And hopefully BSI can go out there with yourselves and just promote that standard. Colin, thank you for your presentation. We received a question before the webinar took place. So here it is. 29184 was drafted pre-GDPR. Will it be updated to include regulated notice and consent requirements? I also have a follow-up to that one.
Okay, well, let me start first. Pre-GDPR requirements. So that's interesting. I mean, you know, certainly it's published. It's got a 2020 publication date on it. Has 29184. Okay. To be fair, that during the time it was being developed, the GDPR was becoming finalized, shall we say, and being enacted. So from that, I partly take the point. That said, of course, it wasn't specifically designed just to support the GDPR. It was much more wide-ranging than that, and it was designed to support a range of different jurisdictions to aid interoperability ultimately, and cross-recognition that those particular jurisdictions might have over time. So one can see why it was a much more wider, it was a wider scope than just the GDPR. That said, the 5-year review, I think the periodic review is actually due next year. So I think there is a case for raising it with the Working Group 5 committee, the Working Group 5, Working Group 5 delegations, to see if they want to perhaps include it as an annex. I'm not convinced that it should be a normative part, personally speaking, given the generalized nature of the standard, but I think it's potentially possible to have it as a non-normative annex, those additional things. So fair question. Thank you. You said there was an addition?
Yes. Next question is, so 29184 focuses on improving online privacy notices and consent. What are the biggest mistakes organizations still make in this area?
I think actually it's a very interesting and wide range question. There's no right answer, I think, wrong or right answer for that. But typically, the case is that the notice, not enough focus is given on the notice. And that strings a whole lot of subsequent problems come out of actually not preserving that, not presenting that notice clearly enough. The other issue is actually in certain cases about not having the notice and the consent very related to each other, literally on the same page, not having the notice hovered, not having the notice come back later when you're looking at a different, the same transaction, but you want to be reminded that you've already given consent for this part, but not for that one. So you need some sort of, some graphical help with things like hovers and pop-outs to be able to help those. Those are the things that I would suggest anyway.
Excellent, Colin. Thank you very much for that informed answer. Quickly moving over to Ray and Michelle, just a quick question here. What advice would you give to organizations just starting their privacy by design journey, especially those without dedicated privacy teams? Is that hopefully an answer a question you can answer?
I think I'll let Michelle answer that because she's heavily into, I think, that side of the aspects.
Okay, so one important thing is a lot of novice, young startup companies, we really do want to encourage them to start that privacy by design journey. So one of the things that we considered while developing the standard 31700-1 was to really focus on, okay, we want small and medium-sized enterprises to be able to take on this particular standard. And that would be the first advice we would provide. Get the standard and really understand what the requirements are. I think the second piece that we considered while drafting the standard was we need to have it in language that is accessible to anyone who isn't familiar with the way that standards are written. So we really wanted it to be accessible broadly, whether it would be to, you know, those companies who don't have the heavy technological support, or even consumers themselves who can then do the sort of checks and balances from a consumer perspective. So that's
Excellent.
what we provide as advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. So this is going to be my last question, and I'm going to ask it to all of you panelists. I think we're almost out of time, and I've just got to make a very quick closing speech. So if you could answer this question as short and concise as possible, that would be greatly appreciated. So we got a question in from an audience member. How easily will it be for SMEs to implement these important consumer protection standards? Tony, do you want to start off first? We'll just quickly move around.
Yeah, it's very much designed for SME particularly. The age assurance framework is about how you can readily select and compare different systems. So whatever your context of use is, or your use case, wherever you are, you can find the right tool for the right solution. From being a global enterprise of like Meta or Facebook or all that, right down to I'm a corner shop and I want to put an age estimation tool on the front of my till so that I can use it to verify whether or not somebody appears to be over the age of 25. That whole gamut and range of technology is relatively easy to implement as an SME.
Excellent. Patrick, how does that apply to zero knowledge proofs?
That's just a tool in the toolbox. But to go back to the question that you asked, the challenge here, there's two challenges. One is that SMEs don't have the time, the resources, the money to do what major corporations or governments do. And the second one is that the contractual and commercial requirements on SMEs require them to play at the same level from a risk point of view as big organizations. So it's a myth that SMEs somehow, they only need to do a little bit. That's not true. That's how organizations get attacked and taken down. So the point being, like we've seen over the last 20 years, what happens is new services need to appear that SMEs can consume. And so the bit that's missing is the trusted intermediaries at the moment. And those trusted intermediaries are going to be dependent on authorities that can provide validated data. So the weak link in the whole of this story at the moment is that organizations, particularly governments, that have authoritative data, they need to make that data accessible to the service providers so the SMEs can consume it. And if that doesn't happen, then SMEs, there's nothing SMEs can do. So governments, get your act together in the digital age. They're able to do it in some countries very well, but in other countries, not at all.
Excellent.
So lobby
Patrick.
is my message to SMEs. Work together, collaborate, lobby. You can't do this by yourself.
Thank you, Patrick. A call to arms as such. Milan, does this apply to the AI standards that you were referencing today, 42001?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we think about the privacy requirements on SMEs, they have to abide by privacy and data protection laws, just as any other organization processing personal data. And the privacy standard that we described in the presentation really helps to understand where those privacy impacts can occur in your development or use of AI systems.
Excellent. Thank you, Milan. And so, Colin, just over to you on this question, just to remind you, so how easy would it be for SMEs to implement the standards that we've been talking about today?
Pretty easy in the case of 29184, because primarily it's common sense. And because we're all used to dealing with notice and consent through our own online experiences on a daily basis, it's a matter of simply remembering some of those things that upset you in your online experience. Go through. It's effectively almost like a checklist. It's so easy to read and so clearly expressed. It is easy for an SME to do that, non-technical as well. So just common sense.
Excellent. Ray, Michelle, would you like to jump in on this and to have a take on that one from a privacy design perspective?
Yes, because when we wrote this standard, we considered the full range of other standards that it intersects with. And the way it's written is there are about 30 requirements that you can ask. You can reverse every requirement to a question. It's easy to implement, in my view, and we provided a use case that to help a developer and a system to understand is what is it we're trying to show. Because in our view, if you implement this and the related standards at the beginning of your corporation or your service, you're not going to run into a disaster 2 years down the road. And people start organizations, SMEs, in order to sometimes become big companies. And big company, to do that, you have to follow the rules from the beginning. Starting with it early may be a bit of a pain, but it's not onerous and it's good practice. To me, it's best practice to be successful. Thank you.
Excellent. Michelle, do you think Ray's answered it there, or are you happy with that answer?
Yes, excellent answer. Thank you.
Okay, last question, simply because of the time. So just very quick feedback on this one. If you could leave the attendees with one key takeaway from your standard or from today's privacy webinar, what would it be? So I'm going to start from the top here, pointing my pen at Tony. If you could go first, please.
I think my one takeaway is age assurance is complex, but it can be done. It can be done privately, it can be done efficiently, and it can be done effectively in accordance with the new international standard.
Excellent. Patrick. Oh, Patrick.
Sorry, just fighting for the button. No, I think the point I would make is this is all about data. This isn't about technology. It's about data. It's about policy and legislation. And governments have to step up to be digital nations. And so they need to be far more active as convening powers within their countries. And the UK is not very good at that, to be blunt. There's more progress being made in other countries because there's greater collaboration, and we need to do more of it. And please, as I say, ISO actually is a really good network for being able to engage on these soft issues. The standards themselves are not enough. It's how we work together that really matters. And I would really like to encourage people to get involved. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Milan?
Takeaway would be do your AI impact assessments and build into your organization your AI governance programs in order to address the potential risks from using or developing AI.
Thank you, Milan. Colin, any key takeaways?
I certainly endorse Patrick's comment to get involved because there's great networking, great knowledge sharing, getting involved in mirror groups and getting involved in standards, ISO or whatever standard set. Certainly do it. In terms of privacy and notice and consent in particular, get ahead of it. You have to get ahead of it because regulators are on the case. They're getting stricter as time goes on. I think we've been in a bit of a honeymoon period. Just get ahead of it to make sure you're not caught out.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. Wise words. Ray, followed by Michelle. Final pieces of advice for
Final
our
word.
attendees.
Well, I agree with Patrick and Colin and Milan. I think getting involved is absolutely essential. Do not be afraid. The world is still going to be there, but we do have to. I think you're right, Colin and Patrick. Governments and authorities have to step up. I find that there are groups outside ISO who don't seem to be fully aware of the work done by ISO and others. And to me, ISO standards are very important. I think of the OECD and the data protection officers who are aware, but we don't seem to have that connection. So I think if I was a consumer, I'd encourage my government to take those connections seriously and try and standardize and try and lead rather than wait. If that, and Michelle can certainly add to that. Thank you.
Perhaps I'd like to just wrap up with a focus on what privacy by design is. Sort of a key takeaway is the important element here is, unlike sort of, laws are important, but we want to bring this back to the businesses, to the organizations, to the consumers. So it is not intended to be a blocker. Privacy should not be a burden. You should build it into your own organization and corporation. Why? Because it's a business issue. It's an issue that you want to ensure that your consumers, your clients, your customers have trust in the organization to handle that data. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, panelists. Excellent sessions. I feel very, very informed. I'm just going to close it down. We're a little bit over time, so I'm just going to make this very, very short. So yeah, thank you to our speakers. Thank you for the team behind here that put this on today. And thank you for everyone attending and for your thoughtful questions, if you did indeed supply them. So that brings day 2 to a close. BSI is offering 20% off a selection of key privacy standards, including the newly adopted ISO IEC 27701, which everyone's talked about today. So use Data Privacy 20. It's just landed on the BSI Knowledge website today. Actually, just going to make a quick shout out. A lot of our members and the experts here today have made this message. So it's just to, if you do want to get in touch with me, if you're interested in joining the national committee, which is on cybersecurity, get in contact. And that mirrors down to the panel on privacy technologies and identity management. Reach out. We need you. We cannot do this without you. So yeah, there it is. And final things are, please do complete the feedback form when it lands. Once submitted, you'll receive the recording. Thanks again for spending your morning with us and for your continued support of BSI's privacy standards. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Excellent.